Hi everybody, Ralph Sorrentino, U.S. Brand Ambassador, CH Precision, with another precision tip on how you can get the most from your CH system. Today we're talking digital playback and the use of proper clock settings in your C1, D1, and T1. Clock settings are essential if you're going to get the best musical performance from your digital subsystem. So today we'll talk clock settings, cables, and connectivity. We'll also talk about the use of the CH Precision Control app so that you can optimize your digital subsystem for the best musical performance. Come on, tick-tock, we're on the clock. Let's get started. Clock signals are the heartbeat of any digital playback system. Clean, precise clock signal waveforms reduce jitter in digital playback and improve the overall musical presentation. Each CH Precision digital component comes with its own internal digital clock subsystem and the ability to receive an external clock signal either from another component or from the highly precise T1 external clock generator by installing optional clock sync cards in your C1 and D1. The first configuration I'll discuss is really the simplest. Let's say you have a C1 DAC and you have it fitted with either a USB or Ethernet streaming card. This is the configuration for users who choose to play back digital files from their network or from a streaming service like Qobuz or Tidal. So what are the correct clock settings in this case? Go to the CH Precision Control app and select C1. Then click on Settings. We need to specify clock source for every digital input. In this case, with just a C1, every digital input clock source should be internal clock. That's because the C1 will use its internal clock to clock all data to the DAC chips. Now, what if we add a D1 transport to the configuration with CH Link HD so that we can spin silver disks as well as playback files from the network and stream from Tidal or Qobuz? What are the correct clock settings in this case? Now that we've added a D1 to the configuration, go to the CH Precision Control app and select D1. Then click on Settings. For clock source, since there are no clock sync cards involved, the correct setting for the D1 is internal clock, since the D1 will use its internal clock as the master. Then go to C1 and click on Settings. For the C1, your streaming services, such as Ethernet or USB, remain internal clock. But for CH Link HD, since no sync cards are in either the C1 or D1, the correct setting here is audio in, since the D1 will use its clock to transfer data. If you own a C1 DAC and D1 transport, you can easily improve performance by adding clock sync cards to both units. The clock sync cards easily install into the backplane of each unit. Note, the clock sync card has a BNC connector at the top and two at the bottom. The topmost is clock in, and the two at the bottom are clock out. You can use your C1 as clock master to clock your D1. You'll need a clock cable to do this. Connect the clock cable to the topmost BNC connector, clock in, of the D1. Then connect that cable to either of the clock outs on the C1. Clock cables are an integral part of the digital clocking subsystem, so using well-made, well-designed cables is essential if you're going to get the best results. I use Nordost Valhalla 2. These cables are terminated with BNC connectors that we need for our clock sync cards, and they're meticulously designed and manufactured to the required 75 ohm impedance. Once your clock sync cards are installed in your C1 and D1, and you have your clock cable connected, you use the CH Precision Control app to define clock source for each unit. Select D1 and then click on Settings. The correct clock source for the D1 is Synchro BNC 75 ohm because we're using the C1 to clock the D1. Now click on C1 and click on Settings. We must define the correct clock source for each digital input. For streaming inputs, Ethernet or USB, the correct clock source is internal clock. And for CH Link HD, the correct clock source is now internal clock because we're using the C1 clock as the master. Now, what if you want to further improve the digital playback performance of your C1 and D1? You can do that by adding the T1 external clock generator. Remember, the better the clock source, the less phase noise introduced into the clock signal, and the more precise the digital to analog conversion becomes. The T1 has 6 clock outputs that output a highly precise 10 MHz sine wave or square wave clock signal. You can also specify high or low level signal amplitude. An optional GPS tracker and antenna is available to keep the T1 clock from drifting over time, as all clocks do. Using the CH Precision Control app, select T1 and then click on Settings. If you purchased the optional GPS tracker, set tracker state to on and tracker source to GPS. We recommend using clock signals, low level, and sine wave waveform to reduce noise. You should also turn off all unused clock outputs. Now, connect a 75 ohm BNC cable, such as the Nordost Valhalla 2 I showed you earlier, from the output of the T1 to the input of the clock sync cards in your C1 and D1. Remember, clock input is the topmost BNC connector on the clock sync card. Now we must set clock source for both units. So let's click on D1 and then on Settings. The correct clock source is Synchro BNC 75 ohms because we're using the T1 as master. Now click on C1 and click on Settings. We have to define the correct clock source for each digital input. For streaming, either Ethernet or USB, the clock source is Synchro BNC 75 ohms. And for CH Link HD, the clock source is Synchro BNC 75 ohms because we're using the T1 as the master. Once all of your clock cables are installed and your settings are correct, take a look at the status screen of the C1. You note the lock on the 10 MHz signal coming from the T1, and you'll see it on the D1 as well. Well, that's it. Until the next time, enjoy your music.